Hello, this is the Lord's Legion and welcome to a brand new countdown, and in this video we're going to be counting down the top 10 most interesting piece of concept art from the Amazing Spider-Man series. And it does appear that a lot of you guys seem to really enjoy these videos, as lately they've been getting a lot of views and a lot of likes. To which I'm very flattered about that, because concept art to me are always very fascinating, and it's always very interesting to see how these could have turned out in the end. And seeing as how the Amazing Spider-Man series did win majority of the votes, therefore I'm going to be doing this video right now. However, I will be making another poll so that you guys can vote on which piece of concept art I should look at next. So without further ado, let's begin with the list. So kicking off the list at number 10, we have the strange Spidey costumes from the first film. Some of these costumes are so bizarre that they almost don't even look like Spider-Man anymore. For starters, we have this one right here who does have the web cape in a similar vein to Spider-Man 2099. And then we also have this version of Spider-Man who almost kinda looks like a heroic toxin minus the mouth. And this fabric on that specific costume looks very weird, and it almost really does remind me of a symbiote. And then we also have this sleeker design of Spider-Man, which although it does actually look pretty awesome, at the same time it's sort of weird in the sense that it looks metallic. And given how this is the first film, it would be weird for Spider-Man to have a metallic suit. However, this one right here is by far the worst costume. All you really need is one look at this costume and you can understand why it's so terrible. Coming in at number 9, we have the lizard with the additional wings, also from the first film. Now if you really believe that the lizard with the additional wings is the weirdest thing you've seen from these concept art so far, then all I have to say to you guys is be prepared, it's Sony. But this piece of concept art is so bizarre because it almost doesn't even look like the lizard anymore. I mean, sure, this version of the lizard does have a snout in comparison to the final version, however, since when did the lizard have wings and a devil-like tail? I mean, at this point, this looks more like a dragon than a lizard. And I'm not gonna lie, this is a pretty fascinating design for the lizard, but at the same time, where did they come up with this? Coming in at number 8, we have the disturbing Electro from the second film. Now, truth be told, these versions of Electro are pretty similar to the final version, however it's the depiction of the concept art that I've chosen here that is actually pretty creepy. I mean, first of all, we have this one right here where Electro is almost very much black. Like all of his powers are deactivated, and I will admit that this actually looks pretty cool. But then on the other hand, we have this final Electro, which is actually very similar to the one we ended up getting, but once again, this version of Electro actually looks more creepy, menacing, and almost alien-like. And it almost seems like this version of Electro has all of his humanity taken away from him. And if Electro was depicted more like this version of Electro, then he would look like a force of nature. Coming in at number 7, we have the Fat Raimi's costume from the first film. Now, there really isn't too much to say about this one other than the fact that it is pretty interesting in that they were going to somewhat recycle the original costume into the reboot. But when you look at this piece of concept art, there's just something really strange about it. And this Spider-Man costume almost looks like an inflatable balloon. Coming in at number 6, we have the various Green Goblin designs from the second film. Now, if you're one of these guys who are expecting a closer version of the Green Goblin in any of these pieces of concept art, then you would be pretty disappointed. Because through and through, we were going to have a semi-Goblin appearance where he would have more of this armoured look. But this one right here is pretty interesting because it looks pretty close to the Sam Raimi's version, albeit a little more sleek and less with the helmet. And speaking of helmets, the Green Goblin almost did sport some sort of helmet that did kinda look like the Goblin mask, or more specifically the purple hat that the Goblin normally wears. But as you can see, again, it's more metallic and green. But the strangest one is of course the winged version of the Green Goblin, because as far as I'm concerned, I don't think there has ever been a version in that the Green Goblin has ever donned mechanic wings. Coming in at number 5, we have Spidey vs. Lizard City Fight from the first film. Now this one is a bit of a head scratcher because we really didn't see this action piece anywhere in The Amazing Spider-Man, which is pretty unfortunate because this kinda looks epic. And this totally feels like a standard Spider-Man Lizard fight, where they keep jumping around the city. And speaking of the city, it doesn't just end with the bus, as they keep on jumping between taxi to taxi. And although we did get something pretty similar to that in the bridge scene, but this to me really does look like a spectacle. And it is unfortunate unfortunate that this entire action piece has been scrapped from The Amazing Spider-Man. Coming in at number 4, we have the various Rhino designs from the second film. Now, despite how Rhino only had 4 minutes of screen time in the entire film, it is surprising that he did have more concept art than almost any other villain. For starters, we have this one right here, which is actually a lot closer to the one from the comics, albeit it with the metallic look, which is a perfect amalgamation of both the classic as well as the ultimate version of the Rhino. And then we also have a much slimmer version of the Rhino, which does remind me of one of the costumes you would see out of the Crisis games. And then, as you can see in this one right here, you can clearly tell that they were going to go with the more Transformers route. And again, despite his very limited screen time, they were actually going to go all out with the Rhino's costume. Coming in at number 3, we have Chris Cooper Lizard from the first film. Now, on the surface, this doesn't look too interesting as it's only Chris Cooper's face while he's about to transform as the Lizard. But what really gets to me is the fact that Chris Cooper was originally going to become the Lizard right until they decided on Rhys Ifans instead of Chris Cooper. But then when you go back to The Amazing Spider-Man 2, Chris Cooper was actually Norman Osborn at the very beginning of the film. And to a degree that is a little disappointing because Chris Cooper has been pretty much robbed from becoming the Spider-Man villain twice. First with the Lizard and then misusing Norman Osborn in the second film, and when you really think about it, it's such a shame. So for number 2, we have the ultimate as well as the classic version of Electro from the second film. Now, much like how they were with Rhino, they were pretty much very experimental with Electro's design. Because when you look at this piece of concept art, you can tell that this version of Electro is much more closer to the ultimate version. But not only that, you can see a bit of that MTV's version of Electro in there as well, most specifically with his hairstyle. And then when you look at this version of Electro, you can tell that this one is actually closer to the classic design. Most specifically when it comes down to his electricity in that it's actually yellow. But not only that, Max Dillon's face is actually closer to the one from the modern comics. And I can't deny that there is a bit of Tron elements within his overall costume as well, which in a way does actually look unique. And finally, for number 1, we have the Miles Morales costume from the second film. Now, this one is by far the most bizarre out of the bunch, because this concept art is actually very accurate to the Miles Morales costume from the comics, albeit it has its own flair. But the bigger question surrounding this piece of concept art is, why were they going to go with that costume for Peter? Because nowhere in the second film they had plans for Miles Morales for The Amazing Spider-Man 2, or even The Amazing Spider-Man series as a whole. But again, I can't deny that this piece of concept art actually does look amazing, and it has its very own flair. However, it's such a huge head scratcher on as to why they would want to use that costume in the first place. I mean, it's almost like giving the Human Torch a Ghost Rider costume because, you know, it's just really weird. And because of how obscure this really is, this is why I honestly think that the Miles Morales costume is by far the most interesting piece of concept art from the Amazing Spider-Man series. So which piece of concept art from the Amazing Spider-Man series did you find the most interesting? Comment below and share some thoughts, and don't forget to check up on the poll in this video so that you can vote on which piece of concept art I should focus on next. And as always, thank you guys for watching this video. Please like and subscribe. Take care and have a good one.